Alrighty, so week 4 in our class, and at this point in the RL, in the real world, I have done a few code reviews, but not all of them. And it's always an interesting process because, especially this semester, for me to watch how well students, and not how well is an objective term, but how they're navigating this compressed course. And I think it's all over the board, honestly, because I would almost expect it to be all over the board given this nature of things. So here in week 4, we make some really important transitions, okay? But before I get into that, I just want to say a word about something in this idea of an array and objects. And as we move further down the course, we're going to end up using or taking objects to a whole new level. And that will be doing what is classically known as in computer programming as classes, right? Object oriented programming, to creating objects from templates. So we're going to do that later on in the semester. So we're not done with learning, of course, by any means, but we're especially not done learning about objects and the way that we do and create and manage objects from a programming perspective. So those actually come towards the end as we also look briefly at APIs at the end of this course. But when I say end, here we are at week 4, really week 8. So we're approaching that midpoint of the semester. Okay, for either type class, but in this case, because we're running it in 9 weeks, so 4 week is that point at which you transition to halfway through. Now, all that means is that there's nothing different in this sense, except that by the point you've seen this, most of you have probably been to a code review. So know that week 4, week 5, and then week 6 is when we have our next one. So, what I think I will do this week as part of the attendance post below it is go ahead and provide the detail, like I kind of did in week 2, of what that requirement is. So, you can just keep that in mind. The thing I would tell you is that if it was me, I find this to be beneficial if I can find the time to, once I finish the code along and the learn together, is actually look at the new functionality that we've learned and take your code base into that new way of thinking, new way of programming. And it's just great practice to do that, right? The more you can the more code you write, the better at it you get. It's just a function of that. So this week, so I'm just going to tell you that. So I will paste below this attendance post those things. Um, so this week, as I introduced and talked about, we will continue the idea of making sure that when you're going through Andrew's course, that you include your coding challenge attempts, your code. So, right, write your code for that attempt and then write his code. And I was doing this because I actually go back through and pretty much walk through just so I can remember some of the foundational pieces and the way they're introduced. And I do notice that when he's creating the to do app and the notes app, it does take a little bit to kind of context switch and open up. And he ends up telling you to actually have another terminal tab. And I talked about this, so I'll just give you the heads up here. When he starts doing the 2 of those directories running live server, again, you don't have to run live server. I talked about this in one of the learn togethers. And if you're just loading it up in another, file manager, you could do that. But having them always running might be a really good idea. Okay. So this week we continue on, and this week we look at week or section 7. And section 7, I just finished just now the Thursday Learn Together. And section 7 is that place that most students think of when they think of JavaScript. If they have any prior experience, they think about it in the browser. And the part of the reason I really like this course is that you get introduced to the language before we get to the browser. And I think that's helpful, and as part of this, attendance post, you could tell me if you feel like that was helpful, but and maybe it's a little too soon. Oh, actually, I had it up there. But going into our course, just to look to remind myself about because I try to take notes on things, right? The coding challenges I talked about and the objects and the classes we talked about. Oh, yeah, this came up just because I think it's good to say this, right? So, let me bring you back. As you may have gotten used to, I grade each day. And I generally grade first thing in the morning if my schedule allows. And if not, I grade when I get back from the gym. But I typically, that's the way that process works. So on Friday, if you end up submitting late on Friday, the work, I don't grade it until the following Monday. And that can be a point of like clarification for folks, because I had one student ask it and I thought it's worth talking about so everyone understands that. Okay. So just know that I grade each day through the weekdays. And in general, I am offline on the weekends. Now, I try to respond to things as they might be more immediate, but in general, and I know this may sound weird, but I have a regular job, meaning I work Monday through Friday. I have weekends off to do my own projects because I do a lot of my own projects. I don't need to get into what they are. And if you want to know, reach out on Discord, which, by the way, I noticed this morning. I woke up, there was a really good discussion last night between some of you on Discord. And that's really what that is for, because many of you are going to be working when I'm not. And so having the ability to at least ask and have somebody look at your code and right is just really valuable in that sense. And that's really what it's for. So I was glad to see that happen last night, and that makes a lot of sense for that. Okay. So I talked about that. I talked about this. The only other thing I did talk about this in the Thursday, but I ended up doing a branch example for myself for my code for the Learn Together for week 4 Thursday night item, because I didn't like my original code, and that's a fairly common thing. I will tell you is that it's fairly common that people may write code and then like I go to sleep on it, and when I wake up the next morning, my brain is clearer. I did this when I was when I was going to Fresno State, when I was taking advanced math classes, and I just couldn't quite register some things. I would think about them before I'd go to bed. I'd wake up in the morning and they'd be more clear. And recently I heard some research about that this is actually a thing, that our brains work on things when we're sleeping and we tend to wake up refreshed. So I think this is part of why I've been suggesting, right? Not doing both the code along and the learn together in the same evening, because you don't give yourself that opportunity to kind of absorb things. And when you're asked to do the coding challenges and or you're asked to do the learn together, it really is that point of seeing how well you're translating these concepts into skill. And then, of course, the learn together is the ultimate check for that for me, and for you. And I had enough conversations at this point to say some students felt like, some of the learn togethers were harder, but once they went to do their own, then that was easier. So it varies based on everyone. So this week, the one thing I had thought about that I didn't do this week, and I'm kind of curious on this reply, is because I just went ahead and had you use for your Learn Together code the decision, the daily decision, whatever your code base was. And I'm kind of curious if you want to continue that, or do you want to make a complete change? Because right now would be the time to do that, because as we add more functionality, as you add more functionality, rewriting that from the very beginning is both good and can take time. So here's, I guess maybe what I could say is I'm very interested in your opinion about this. But I think what I would say is if you are like tired, because this can happen, it's like some people get tired of the code base, the topic that they've been working on, and they want to do something else. That's fine. Right now would be the time to do that, meaning for the learn together. Now, having said that, the one thing I do recommend is that you take whatever code you had for Dev 0 and you then refactor that for Dev 1 and then refactor that into Dev 2. It just makes it, again, the idea of as you learn to write more and more code, starting from scratch gets more and more challenging. In a 9-week class, I just wouldn't suggest it. So, but I also, come talk to me if you have a question about that. Because sometimes we start a topic and we're like, oh my God, that I'm so done with that. I want to do something else, which is good. I posted this for my CIT82, my introduction to web stuff. I don't know how many of you saw there was two things that happened were the last couple weeks. One was the release of at least the concept of a Tesla building a robot, which isn't a huge surprise, honestly, given what they're doing. And then also the machine learning model that actually writes code. If you look at it, might make some people learning how to code make them a little nervous, but really it shouldn't, because that technology has a long way to go. And honestly, next semester I'm teaching machine learning, which I'll just plug that class right here, just to help you understanding the difference between what we're doing, which is classic programming, and machine learning. So anyway, enough of that. So reply with any of the things that I've talked about or with something else that you feel. And at this point, if you have some feedback about the code reviews, please feel free to do that. Otherwise, there is your week 4 in CIT 93 JavaScript. Have a good one.